Hello, my name is Spencer and welcome back to my hobby channel. I enjoy making crafting videos to help escape from the realities of my everyday life. In this video, we'll be participating in Boylai Hobby Time's Patreon monthly art challenge. I believe that Boylai Hobby Time is one of the most incredible creators out there today, and I would say if one channel has led to an inspiration for my channel, it would be his. I spent most of April working on this cool little Star Wars diorama, but unfortunately I did not realize the prompt was not a land battle, but it was in fact pod racers, so I had to pivot pretty quickly. I had about 5 days before the project was due, so I kind of panicked and I just started putting ideas together. To start, I knew that a pod racer required a pod and some racing components. I also didn't want to make just any other pod racer. So I figured, what do races have that aren't necessarily just race cars? All races that I have ever attended have ambulances standing by. So I thought it would be a kind of fun, kind of unique idea to make an ambulance pod racer. Just kind of a European Union color themed. Ideally, I might be able to find a way to incorporate BACTA or some medical service into it as well. My April had been an incredibly busy April for me, so I pretty much had a straightforward plan. Panic, make the plan, build it, paint it, present it. As a bit of a challenge for myself, I wanted to make this project out of completely reused parts. So I started by heading to my local reclamation store by finding some junk, effectively, that I could make into a custom pod racer. I found this wooden base, this Walkman type thing, some old headphones, and a car jack phone charger that I thought could work really well. Unfortunately, with the tight timeline, I did have to find some pod alternatives. And I saw this model at my local hobby shop, and this cockpit and 2 engines seemed almost too perfect for a pod racer to pass up. First, I decided I wanted to get the pieces out to see exactly what they looked like. I just wanted to make sure that the pieces were to scale-ish enough and that it could be a potentially convincing pod racer. For some extra bits and bobs, I then broke into my loot from the reclamation store. The Walkman ended up being a treasure trove with these types of little cylindrical knobs on the motherboard, and the buttons backs looked like wonderful grates that I could put on my pod racer. Then the headset port on the Walkman looked like a wonderful exhaust type item. Once I had all my extra bits and pieces pulled together, I could then move to fixing up the base. I knew for this project that I wanted to have a lit up component for the coupling between the pod turbines for our pod racer. I got the switch, drilled a hole, and then scoured it as much as possible to make sure that the switch will fit in the later steps of the project. Then I used my trusted hobby tools to free the turbine components from the A10's model kit and assemble them together. Once the turbines had gotten the necessary time to set, I then took my serrated saw and trimmed off the turbine engines as clean as I could. Once freed, I could hit my recently liberated turbines with my hobby knife just to make sure that the bottoms were as smooth as possible. Then I took some watered down Vallejo plastic putty and put it over the gaps in between the turbines, wiping away any excess as they appeared. The car jack I found actually ended up looking enough like a pod racer that I was pretty happy with it, and the only thing we needed to add was the cockpit. I'm pretty sure as a kid I even pretended to use these types of car jacks as spaceships while on road trips with my family. To add all the bits and bobs onto our ambulatory pod racer, I used super glue and just made sure to remain as symmetrical as possible on both sides of the craft. For the turbines, I did mostly the same, except I also tried to make it a little asymmetrical, just so you got that semi-built-up pod racer vibe. For the final bits and bobs for the turbines, I created little grooves into the sides using my pin vise, and then I went in and glued some bronze wire and bent it to the appropriate shape so it looked kind of like some power wiring going to different parts of the engine. Once both turbines were complete, we could move back to focusing on the main body of the pod racer. The only thing that I wanted to fix before painting my pod racer was the fact that this little glass area had a logo on it. To get rid of it, I brought in my Dremel and I started sanding away just to give it a chalky, damaged look. The vision for the back seat of this pod racer is kind of a back to the jacuzzi type thing. Like they went out, grabbed the racer, threw them in the back, and now are trying to race them back to safety. To help with giving the Bacta some depth, I added a couple layers of matte varnish to the recently damaged area to make sure that you couldn't see through the bath. To connect the pod with the racers, I then superglued some armature wire onto each of the turbine engines. The car jack actually had a nice recess within it already, so it just kind of slid in, and then I super glued those into place as well. Now that I could see how the final assembly was looking, I then drilled into the sides of the turbine engines for the coupling in a future step. Prep for the priming process, I decided I wanted to mask the Bacta tank area, and to do this I will be using Play-Doh. Not necessarily the most common masking material, but it is incredibly cheap, does not leave a lot of residue, and it saves some space for me in terms of having less supplies than I actually need. I started by priming the engine turbines white so I could get a nice coverage for the front of the engines, which I knew I wanted to be fluorescent yellow and blue in later steps. I then marked off the areas that I wanted to be those aforementioned colors, so I didn't misprime this next step, although this proved to be an incredible mistake. Then I came in and spray painted the rest of the engine black. Again, I'll tell you all why that's such a big mistake later on, but I was able to prime the rest of the pod racer at this point. I was pretty happy with how the cockpit looked at this point, so I redid the Play-Doh trick and covered it up so I didn't destroy it in the next portion. So, for any experienced painters, you might be screaming and kicking and crying when I do this. This was the biggest mess up of the project. It added so much time. Just advice to everyone, never paint yellow over black. It's just a horrible decision. I chose ambulance yellow, the best color that I had for it. However, it took multiple coats, took forever. The airbrush was pooling. It was just a nuisance, but I did enjoy the process, I guess. Once we had properly made our ambulance European Union colored, we could then remove the masking tape and the Play-Doh from the cockpit. Then focusing on bringing up some of the other base colors, I could paint the metal bits close to their original bronze color again. I painted any exterior, brighter parts of metal that I wanted silver. I painted the interior of the jet turbines a jet turbine exhaust metal color. I then hand traced a few blue triangles onto the fronts of the engines. These weren't necessarily perfect, nor did they have to be, but it was fun to improve my technical painting skills as much as I could during this step. I then went in and picked out a few specific panels and painted them blue as well, just to incorporate the overall European Union ambulance theme to the entirety of the pod racer. I then came in with a black enamel wash to bring out some of the most recessed details of the jet turbines. Once everything had a chance to dry, I came in with the fluorescent yellow reflective paint. And where needed, I painted the interior of the grates black just to give the pod racer a little bit more depth and a little bit less of a plastic glued onto plastic vibe. I decided I wasn't super happy with how the pod looked at this point, so I added some tape and decided that I wanted the back half of the pod to be the same blue as the turbines. Finally, once all the painting was done, I could go in and remove the Play-Doh from the original back to tank area. I then added a blue contrast paint that hopefully got close to the back to color. Once our racer was done, we could then move back to our nice wooden base, and I took it outside for a flat black prime. While that dried, I threaded a few brass rods through the turbines in the pre-made holes that I made earlier. Then I soldered an LED filament between the two engines, providing that coupling that makes pod racing oh so iconic. Next, we could take our pod racer and mount it to the base. Usually I like making more than just a black stand for things, but unfortunately, April for me was incredibly chaotic, and work-life balance was really struggled with. So I was pretty happy with how it turned out with just the black base. Finally, I painted the couplings a gray color just so it could stand out a little bit more on top of the black. And then I decided it was good enough for some glamour shots. To those of you who made it to the end, thank you. This hobby provides a much needed escape from life for me. Sharing these tiny nerdy projects with you means the world to me, and if you'd like to see more of my projects, please feel free to leave a like and subscribe. If you want to check out other creators who make projects like this, I cannot recommend Boylai Hobby Time's channel enough. He is the gold standard in my opinion, and he has a great community of other artists. To Boylai, thank you very much for hosting these types of community events. They help me get out of my routine, set a deadline, and engage with your community. I really appreciate them. I apologize for the absence and the chaos of this episode. I haven't been able to put as much time into this hobby or even to myself recently. I'll be back soon with another build, another story, another journey. Until then, take care, and I hope you all have an excellent week. See you around.